Welcome to the Smarter Church Communications. I'm Zack Esgar, your host, and this is a podcast where we empower church leaders like you to streamline your communications, connect more effectively with your congregation, and reach even more people in your community. Whether you're looking for practical tips, fresh ideas, or strategies to make your message stand out, you're in the right place. We're going to be starting this new podcast focus of giving you some quick tips to help you as a church leader or church communicator more effectively communicate. And I'm super excited this week to introduce to you Mindy, who is on our staff. She is an amazing church leader, church communicator who has many years of experience in the church communications world. So I want to welcome you and introduce you to Mindy. Mindy, thanks so much for being on the podcast with us today.
Thanks for having me. This is my very first podcast ever to be on.
Well, we're excited. Tell us a little bit more about you and your experience in being a leader at a church.
So I am Zach's newest hire at 10 Apps, and I love working for him. It is a part-time position, and my other part-time position is being on staff at a church. I've been at this church for 27 years as an attendee, and 16 of those has been as a staff member. I was full-time for the majority of that. As the creative arts pastor, I oversaw the worship service on Sunday, and then my other half of that was communications. And currently, I still oversee communications at my church. And so I have a passion for communications. I love what we get to do. And the truth of it is, I came into it as a nurse. My education is as an RN, and so I had to really learn a lot over the last 16 years to know what I'm doing, and I still don't always feel like I do know, but hopefully this podcast will help those of you. Some of you have been educated in this, and great, but some of you are just like, I love it, and I want to learn, and I don't know what I'm doing, so we are here to kind of fill in the gap for that.
That's awesome. Well, I'm super excited. As we look ahead at 2025, I think you have so many years of experience in church communications. I would love just to hear today, just a quick tip that you, like, what's one thing that really stands out to you in church communications that you think could really be impactful and valuable for other church leaders or church communicators to implement in 2025?
Okay, so for me, a game changer was I did an online mentorship with a man named Stephen Brewster. You need to look him up and follow him. He's a church creative. He's doing more music now. But he had a mentorship that I learned the word axiom from him. And what he challenged me to do, and anyone that went through this program, was what are the axioms of your church? And an axiom is, the basic definition would be a statement that everyone believes is true. And so every church has statements like that in place, whether you know it or not. But his challenge to me was like, what are your axioms at your church for all the areas of your church? Those need to be defined by you and by your entire staff. And then you double down on those statements whenever you're talking about, for example, next gen. One of our axioms is there is no age limit on a life that can be used by God. So, you have these axioms in your pocket, and when you're talking about the different areas, that's what comes up. And the great thing about an axiom is they give the why. Because I think in communications, it's really easy. We have so much to communicate that you can almost just like throw announcements at people, almost like a bulletin board or whatever. And you need to be more like the why, because people don't care about the what if they don't know the why. So that's what these
Absolutely.
axiom statements help with.
That's so cool. I love that insight because I attend the church that you're on staff at, and I love whenever there's an announcement, there is always that axiom behind it, and it's almost reiterated so much that I really have more buy-in because I understand the why of why we do small groups or the why behind children's ministry. And so I think to me, even there's this point of an axiom that you're communicating the why, but every time that there's an announcement about small groups, that why or that axiom is there. And to me, even as I invite other people into small groups, it gives me this it helps me connect them to that mission, or it helps me connect them to the why of why small groups are important. And I love that because it really empowers your congregation. I think, to move the mission forward a little bit more. And I've at least experienced that. Have you seen that on your end, or how have you seen buy-in or sort of the congregation take to these axioms as y'all have put thought and effort into it? How have you seen the congregation actually take a hold of these axioms?
I think that's a good question, and it encourages me to hear you as a congregant say, I notice those, I get those, and it's harder for me on my end to know are they hitting. But I think like for me, almost like picturing people almost eye rolling, like not in a mean way, but like here they go again. We know circles matter. We know life is better connected. Like for you to almost go, here it goes again. That means our job is done. And then that potentially like you as a small group leader, which you are, is like I can talk about this in this way and then add my own experience to it, means we've hit the target.
Absolutely. Now, maybe could you give us some examples of some of those axioms that y'all use that might help give us some thought to get some of these rolling around in some of our different ministry areas?
Yeah, I'll do that, but I want to tell you the first thing I did when Stephen challenged me with this, I was like, well, gosh, I don't know. So I asked our senior pastor, could we sit down as a staff at our next meeting and just generate, like, talk about, do we have these? And so we sat down and just made a list of the things we say a lot, because chances are you already have them in place. And then if you kind of go by area and you go, well, we have them in place for a lot of these areas, but this area we really don't. So let's come up with one together. And sometimes it's your value statements. If you have those, it could be they're kind of playing a dual role. It could be mission statement. Like you may already have these in place, but I think like locking them in as a staff is a really important piece. If I'm the only one using them, they're not going to hit and they're not going to land and take root. But if everyone's using them, they will.
Yeah.
So for us, give me an area, Zach, and I'll shoot our axiom to you.
Small groups.
Small groups. We believe life is better connected. We believe circles matter. We believe life transformation happens in the context of Christ and community.
That's awesome. And now, as you even said that, those were so quick. You don't have a script in front of you. Those are just known by heart. And the other thing that stood out to me too is it doesn't just have to be one axiom. Like I was thinking like some of these might just have one. Do you have different ministry areas that maybe have more than others, or is it just sort of whatever really fits that ministry area?
Yeah, it just varies. So, like with Next Gen, the two that come to mind for me would be there is no age limit on a life that can be used by God, and we believe the Next Gen matters. If you talk to our Next Gen pastor, Tammy, she probably has a few more. If you talk to Christy, who's our Acorn Club, she may have a couple. But you at least need to have a few that are your broad, overarching statements that you would use in your communications.
Absolutely. Give us one for giving. Do you have one for giving?
Giving is an act of worship.
Awesome. That's cool. Now, I like some of those to help get our brains rolling and thinking about that. I would really like to think of like if I'm listening and we've never really written down these axioms like you said, what would be sort of those steps? Like you sort of went through the first step is writing down like what do you currently say, and then seeing maybe what are some areas or ministry areas that you need to develop those in. But then once you have those developed as a staff, what's sort of the next steps we should take as a staff to begin to roll those out? Like, does that look like signage? Does that look like announcements? Or like, what are the steps you would see that have been effective in helping you really communicate those with the church and beginning to see those actually take hold and not just be a value that's said, but really a value that's lived out?
True. So I think the great thing about this exercise is that you will use them in everything you do as a communicator. So it starts with your website, where you have those statements all over your website. You use them there. So this is more for the communicator. You use them in your social media posts. So I did one yesterday that was about circles matter in the Next Gen 2, and I did a whole post about that, but we drew it why they matter and what those circles look like in the area. So instead of just posting really neat pictures of Next Gen and circles, we called it what it was, and we talked about why that matters. So social media, and then announcements from the front. We call that our welcome. You're going to make sure when you're writing a welcome about groups that you're using those axioms in the script and in the visuals or in the videos that you make to promote that area. And then you encourage your staff team when they are communicating with their volunteers or doing their social media that they try to use those axioms too. So there's just
That's
a few ways to do it.
No, that's awesome. I love that. And I think even as being a staff member, I was a college pastor for a while. And in that role at my church, I think one of the things that really helped me from our sort of senior leadership or from just my director who was over me was to really talk through those. And I feel like we came up with some of those values or mission statements. We didn't quite bring them to axioms. And I think one of the things that I'm encouraged by is that this is really, I think sometimes mission and vision statements or value statements can be so long and we're trying to catch so much into it that it's like this long sentence that nobody can remember. But I think what I struggled with as trying to bring some of those mission and value statements into my practical day-to-day ministry was they were so long and complex that it wasn't something that could be easily repeated. And I think that's really, I think one of the powers of this idea of axioms and implementing them is simplifying those values, simplifying that mission statement to where your congregation, the people in your church, the people in your youth group, in your small group, in your college ministry can actually really get a hold of those and remember them. And so that when they are inviting people or when they are choosing to volunteer or whatever they're taking their next step in, that they really have the why behind it and that heart behind it. And I think if I was to roll the tape back into my college ministry days, I wish I would have had axioms that I could like just type on a sheet of paper to remind myself even before I go give an announcement about small groups or things like that, because I think it really does just bolster and giving that why behind the announcement. That's really what's going to grab somebody to sign up for a small group than just like, hey, we have this cool QR code, like, yay, go sign up. But giving them the why should I go scan that QR code? Why should I sign up? The circles matter, like those types of axioms, I think really push that decision for somebody to take their next step. So I love how you've described axioms, the power of them. Any other thoughts about axioms that we haven't hit yet that have been impactful or powerful for you?
Well, I think one thing too is that some churches are newer and they're younger or newer, and you may not even have value statements yet. So as you build your value statements, they can even be your axioms if you make them simple. And so if you're in the building process, just think what is replicable. Like I remember years and years ago, we sat down and this was like 20 years ago, sat down with a group of leaders and said, what's our mission statement? And like not everybody knew it. And so as you think about any type of statement that describes your church, it needs to have handles and it needs to be something that people can repeat.
Yeah.
And it's not like 18 lines long or whatever. So, I just think it's important. And then if you can explain it in a few words, then you really understand it. Or, you have it nailed. So with mission, values, and axioms, like make them have handles, I think.
That's awesome. And I think what's really cool, I think, is a lot of us are looking at this new year and planning ahead. I think a lot of us are thinking like, how do I fill my social media calendar and be present in social media of our congregation? And I think this is such an easy handle to grab onto and just say, hey, these are easy things to plan out. Like if you have 10 axioms in your church, that's 10 social media posts that you could just rinse and reuse, put different pictures to, put a different spin on. But the more repetition I think people see that in their social media feeds this year, the more easily they're going to connect with it as you say it on Sundays, the more easily they're going to connect with it as they see it on any signage, whatever modes you have that communicated in. I just think what an easy just thing to help you bolster your social media this year. And like you said, turn it more from not just in a bulletin board or announcement board, but really into this engagement of what's the why behind small groups or what's the why behind our giving. And so I think that's just such a brilliant idea. And I think an encouragement for all of us as we head into this new year of how we can use these axioms to help bolster our church communications across the board. So any other thoughts or ideas as we wrap up today on axioms?
No, I like what you said about social media because that's my strategy for 2025. I looked back at last year and our most liked posts are always just pictures of people. And it's the simple carousel. You don't even have to do, fancy with it.
Yeah.
But to go take pictures on Sundays and then attach an axiom to it, that can be, a weekly, like you said, a weekly social media strategy that conveys our why to both your people and then to people that might be guests,
Yeah.
so that's an
No.
easy step, I think. I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm super excited for churches out there to begin to implement Axioms. And thank you, Mindy, so much for spending some time with us today to expand upon this simple, but I say yet powerful practice that people can put into their strategies in 2025. And if you're interested in following along, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, share it with other church leaders. We'd love to continue to work together in making your church communication smarter and more impactful. Until next time, we'd love to connect with you online through social media, but we hope that this podcast and future podcasts will help you make a greater impact with greater clarity and purpose in your community. Until then, see you next time.